Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Partnerships with Purpose podcast. We're going to explore ways to engage communities through service learning projects and research. I'm Cedric Shy with the Texas Target Communities program at Texas A&M University. We're hoping these stories will highlight and inspire more community-engaged partnerships. So today we have Professor Bill Eisele from Texas A&M's Transportation Institute. He's been a researcher and a professor for over 30 years now, and he is an expert in community-engaged learning. Welcome to the podcast, Professor Bill. Would you just tell us about yourself, your background, and what do you do? Like, what's your why and what do you do?
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. So, I think from early on, I've always had this kind of fascination with transportation. I didn't really know that that's what it was, but from an early time, I always liked science, math, public service, and thankfully I found transportation. Probably from the back of a station wagon or a van or a camper, like most people in the summer getting driven around to different places. And so I was always fascinated with how people get where they go and, kind of how the world works. And just found myself going to engineering school in civil engineering. And then, of course, for later graduate degrees, getting those in transportation, and then found myself at TTI, Texas A&M Transportation Institute, where I've been now for 31 years. Thought I was just passing
Wow.
through, but here I am still and have had progressive opportunities with them, and it's been a fun ride. A lot of great people, great projects, and I'm currently one of our associate agency directors over all things planning and policy, freight, trade, data science, mobility, all those different topic areas, a fairly large area.
Amazing. So what aspect of transportation do you work on? Do you study? What's your expertise there?
Yeah, well, over 3 decades, I've touched on a lot of different areas. To be honest, most recently, I'm doing a lot in the freight space, goods movement, freight, supply chains, helping sponsors get really people and goods and really data where it needs to be and when it needs to be there, and helping them to understand where bottlenecks are in the transportation system and what possible solutions might look like. That's really where I think me and our entire team excel.
That's pretty fascinating. I guess I don't normally think about exports when it comes to transportation. I think more about, public use and right of ways and all that kind of stuff. So I actually didn't really know that that world was studied.
Yeah, and it's a big world, and a lot of people don't realize it. More recently, people have recognized it. When you have a pandemic and shelves are empty, it
Yeah.
was probably one of our best marketing opportunities.
Yeah.
Is people are like, "Hey, why can't I get toilet paper? Why can't I get water? What's up with that?" It's like, "Well, let's tell you a little story about this." And the other thing I often hear is people are so frustrated when they're driving down the highway. "Oh, there's all these trucks around. What's this all about?" Well, have you bought anything on Amazon lately? If you have, you might be maybe a participant in this problem.
You're the demand.
Right.
Your work in transportation planning has led you to the classroom. How long have you been teaching?
It's funny. I haven't looked at that in a while, but I bet it's been close to 20 years. I've done some teaching over in civil engineering and then, of course, now in urban planning, similar types of classes. And it's just been a real joy for me. I really enjoy being in the classroom.
Yeah. So going into the classroom now, what classes do you teach? And can you talk to us about maybe like what's special about your classrooms and how you teach them?
So currently, what I teach is an applied transportation studio, and we work very closely with the Texas Target communities. And that group, your group, does all the hard work. I have to tell you, the challenges that come up, the arrangements with the local communities, et cetera. It's been a great team, is what it
Hmm.
really has been, and so it's been very enjoyable. So we work with communities. I'll bring in different aspects of transportation that I think the students need to understand, because I typically see them right before they're about to graduate. So I get a
Hmm.
lot of the graduate students, right? And so I try to give them a lot of real world applications, pro tips for how the real world's going to be in about a year when they leave that classroom, and give them a little bit more insight into that. I also take some time to challenge them
Mhm.
and communicate to them that, hey, this is a good place to make some mistakes,
Mhm.
rather than maybe next year when
Yeah.
you're working for a real company or a city or somewhere and you get thrown into a public meeting. If you want to lean into that and start to try to stretch your horizons a little bit, this is a good place to do that. I recognize some students don't want to, and I also tell them that, look, we're going to work in groups. The world is a group project. And I'm big on strengths and understanding your strengths and working to those. So I certainly recognize people appreciating their strengths and just working towards those strengths too. So I stay real focused on the why, which is preparing them for the future, bringing in people that are going to help them on the projects, but also give them insights for the real world, and a lot of discussion about stakeholders and making sure we're getting the input from everybody that's necessary.
That's amazing. Yeah, so you're, like, saying this is a firm you're working for before you work for the firm.
Exactly, and I do have a lot of that. I'm glad you brought that up because I'll actually send out a first day email, and it's a huge packet that probably intimidates a lot of them. But on the very bottom of that, I put something in there about, here's a good way to think about this course.
Mhm.
We're all consultants working for a community. Texas Target Communities is essentially, they're kind of the prime contractor,
Mhm.
right? Because they're doing the interface with the client, with the community, and we're focused on more on that transportation plan, and I think it sets up for a good dialogue for how to approach the class and how it can be successful.
Yeah, gets students in the right frame of mind because something we've done many engaged learning classes, and we've learned, oh, it's really important for students to kinda understand that it's a little different working in the real world or bringing a class into the real world. It's not quite just your basic syllabus structure. And we even in our team, we've been thinking a lot about syllabus, and I know think a lot about syllabus. So can you tell us a little bit about how you structure your syllabus before the class starts? What are some things that you're gonna have to nail down? Some things that, maybe commonly can get missed or some things you learned over time?
Absolutely. Great question. And it really does start with the syllabus and putting a tight syllabus together. I see the syllabus and I tell the students this on day one, that this is my contract to you. This is what's going to happen in this class. I pretty much nail down as many of the details as possible. I like to think it wasn't so long ago that I was in their shoes,
Yeah.
wondering what's next and, what's that lecture really going to be about. So even though it was a long time ago, it's, I think, important for them to understand where we're going in the class, where we've been in the class, what's
Mhm.
next, and why are these speakers coming in. And so I lecture a fair amount, but then I also bring in a lot of professionals that are in the field doing more of what we're going to talk about in the day to day. So, thoroughfare planning
Mhm.
or an economist from TTI or somebody who understands exactly what all those possible funding mechanisms are for the implementation of the projects. So, again, going back to try to make it as real as possible for everyone.
Yeah, and then what are those projects? What kind of stuff that the students create?
Mainly working again through Texas Target Communities. We are focused on doing comprehensive plans. So typically, a community will approach Texas Target Communities and want to have student support for a comprehensive plan, for example. So then, what my class does, they come in and they write the transportation chapter,
Mhm.
essentially. And so it's a dialogue about what their goals are, what their vision is for the community if we haven't tackled that yet, what that means within transportation, and then we develop for them an implementation plan of how to make that happen. So what are those goals? How do those goals tie to objectives? How do those objectives tie to specific action items? Who needs to be involved for those particular action items, and how do we get it funded? And we try to get that football. We're coming up on Super Bowl Sunday, so we try to get that
Mm.
football down the field as far as we possibly can
Mhm.
for the client, for the community in this case, because typically it is adopted by
Mhm.
the city council and becomes a legal document then, and so then it's something that they can refer to actually move their community forward.
So thinking about that, it's this middle ground I feel like a community engaged learning has where, our students, they're not professionals yet. So, we're not expecting them to produce professional work, but also they're almost professionals. And so how do you go about just grading and also um, finding that balance between, hey, this is also, a low capacity community where, they really can't afford, when you go work for your big boy job. So that's why they're coming to us. But how do you find that middle ground with students to go, hey, I want to, challenge you to really lean into this, but also, this is still school. So I don't want you to have to produce something that's, professional grade. How do you balance that? How do you explain that to your students?
Excellent question. So we kind of keep the end in mind, and what's nice is now we have a pretty good book of business. We have a lot of good examples of things that we have done, and
Hmm.
and we rely on those. And so beginning with the end in mind, I will tell them, go look at those old examples, and oftentimes the format, the content, the outline, and in some cases, the actual goals for some of these other communities are quite similar. So that takes, I think, a little bit of that stress
Hmm.
off of, just looking at a blank piece of paper. When you're not looking at a blank piece of paper, let's begin with something that we have and go from there.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because for them, they see it's attainable. Okay, my colleagues have done this. My other friends have done this. Like, this is something for us to strive to, rather than I need to be a professional.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, and again, it can intimidate some of them, but that's that part where I'll reinforce, to try to challenge yourself a little bit, and if they don't want to, that's okay,
Yeah,
and I'll say that too, that you may have skills where, you're the GIS person, and that is okay. You're the one that's gonna do the maps. That's okay, because odds are if that's your sweet spot now, probably gonna be your sweet
that's it.
spot when you're working with a team somewhere, and you may wanna just have a GIS job and a map job. So it doesn't do me any good, doesn't do the client any good to force you out there and be running the public meeting or engaging strongly with the community. On the other hand, some people want to do that, or they might be that map person and say, "Okay, I'm kinda interested in rolling up my sleeves and working more closely with the community on a
Hmm.
particular aspect." It can make grading complicated.
Yeah.
You asked about grading, and I was in high school, and I've been working on this question my entire life. So anybody listening, you can continue to listen. You can continue to noodle over this for me. I had a physics professor teacher in high school, and I asked him one day. I got real frustrated, and I told him, I said, grades are the worst thing. They do not identify how good I am at this. It doesn't
Mm.
capture all the skills I have. I just don't understand the silly question, and this grading system just doesn't capture it. And he looked me in the eye. He said, "You're absolutely right, Bill." He said, "You come up with a better system, and we'll implement it tomorrow." So anybody listening to this, I've been working on that since, trying to figure that out.
30 years though, 30 years.
Yeah. So, like, again, making the students part of the solution, I do have them do a peer evaluation, and that's important. I
Hmm.
I can't be in their team meetings all the time. I
Yeah.
I usually hear things are great or things are terrible. I don't hear things in between, right? So then I can kinda, and if there's, if there's a bad situation or something, I can, usually hear about it, and then we'll
Yeah.
work on it, and things will be fine in the end. They always are. But that does help that I can say, "Hey, there's a peer evaluation and that's part of your grade now."
Yeah. So how do you kind of moving further from syllabus and over the themes of the classroom, how do you put those teams together? Do you have them do sort of a strength assessment, or is it more kind of like just tell me what your strengths are and then I'll that helps me think about the class? Do you do it beforehand?
Yeah, great question. I try to learn as much as I can about them before the first day of class, but
Hmm.
essentially I have it all set up on the first day of class. So I try to get a sense. I'll usually meet with staff at Texas Target Communities
Mhm.
and we'll review who the students are, what we know about them, kind of what their skill sets are, how they would balance out in an appropriate team. I typically have, of course, mostly urban planning students. I sometimes get a spattering of land students,
Mhm.
or even architects, and I've had political science students in the past. But by and large, my next biggest grouping is civil engineering. And so this current cohort, for example, I've got I think 12 planning, 3 civils, and a land person.
Yeah, so a little
So
so a little bit of mixture. So you put
yeah.
together do your groups and their groups ever switch around, or is it always just like this is the same group? You go with that and it kind of works out in the end?
Yeah, I try to I'll force I think it's good for both the planners and the engineers to work together. So I do force them to
Yeah.
stretch each other's minds and work with each other. And essentially, especially if I have a large class, it gets a little bit difficult
Uh-huh.
to break them into groups. I'm like, look, y'all are heading to the same thing. Just sort of make this work.
Yeah.
But assignments are really important too. I haven't brought that up. When I first would teach this, I think I've gotten better at tightening up the assignments to be
Mhm.
hyper focused on the project. So the first assignment now is tell me about yourself. And then the second question is get with your group and here's the topic areas and discuss the division of labor. Start talking about where's the strengths in your group, who
Mhm.
wants to do what, and let's make sure that we get that documented because I've got to see that you're making progress because things move fast in the classroom.
That's great. I think that's a great way to get students moving and going. So whenever we start making those trips, it's like we know what we're doing, we know our roles. If you're not doing it, we have a we have a system to say you're not doing it,
Absolutely.
in place.
Yeah.
So let's just I'm just kind of like visualizing a semester in my head, and I'm asking you questions through the semester.
Sure.
So you start to going on trips. How do you get students prepared for trips? Do these students typically have they ever had any sort of engaged learning with the real community, with the real client? And if this is their first time, like how do you get them ready to go and do some facilitation?
Yeah, well, again, relying on my friends at Texas Target Communities helps a lot. But having those meetings where they come into the classroom and say, here's kind of the expectation, here's the agenda, here's what we're trying to cover, here's what success looks like when we leave the room is very helpful. It's very, very well prepared. And I think with the students and working on the projects, like they tend to lean into that and
Yeah.
want to be part of that solution. And again, that's where having that conversation up front about comfort level, because
Uh-huh.
some of them, as a student who was once a young engineering student, that the outgoing days for me, I might stare at somebody else's shoes and not my own shoes, right? So I know those people are out there, and I don't want to terrify them, right?
Yeah.
So it's getting them comfortable and helping them understand that there's a place for them no matter where they're coming into this
Hmm.
thing, whether they want to have an active, more extroverted
Yeah.
opportunity, you
Frontline.
can, or you can have more of an introverted role. There's much like the real world,
Yeah.
there's needs everywhere, right? So it's kind of finding your community and what you want to do. And then of course providing them some guardrails and insights about how to behave and who you're representing
Hmm.
and just recognizing that you're recognizing you are representing the Texas A&M University system when you're
Hmm.
there, whether you like it or not. You may be one of the only recent interactions that some of these small communities out in the hinterlands have had with Texas A&M, and so
Hmm.
you're wearing that badge, if you will, when you come in there. So we need to make sure that we act the part.
Yeah. I think that's great because when thinking about facilitation, I think you could sometimes I remember I being interviewing interns, students who are like, "Well, I'm not, very outgoing, so sometimes I'm a little worried that I have to be that." And I'm like, "Actually, no, facilitation. There's actually a role for everybody in facilitation. Like, you do not have to be like Cedric, who can talk someone's head off and ask questions.
Right.
You can be in the sidelines. You can, tap me and go, "Hey, don't forget this." I'm like, "Oh, thanks. I forgot that." And stuff
Absolutely.
like that. So I think that's a great way to set the framework for students so they can all feel like they're all empowered. Because it definitely takes a team to do facilitation. It's not just an outgoing person. So like along the way, you're in your class and you got your team built. You've got, um, experts coming in. You go on the trip. Has there ever been some challenges that you've experienced along the way where you've had to adapt or change, or do you have any even just like learning stories from the past in your classroom?
Yeah, there always are those examples, and I think a lot of that probably boils down to the biggest concern, the biggest question we often have is everybody being heard, much like anything in planning, right? Have we reached out to all audiences? Are all stakeholders engaged?
Hmm.
Has everybody been able to voice an opinion? So there's sometimes when we'll show up at communities where it's a little light
Yeah.
in the attendance, for example, and we're like, yeah, you can only do so much. But that's primarily the thing where we find ourselves pivoting the most is okay, it was a little bit light. Oftentimes, even when it is light, we're pleasantly surprised that, okay, yeah, the people that did show up, they showed
They
up
showed up and they know.
and they know pretty much everything we needed to hear, but there's still that in the back of your head. You're thinking, boy, but did that cover everything?
Yeah.
Are there still some voices out there that might be missing? That's probably honestly the main one that's always in the back of our head is because we're plowing forward on a comprehensive plan in pretty short order
Yeah.
and much like the real world, making sure that we've got everybody's input is the most important thing. I just want to kind of double down on how rewarding and fulfilling this is for me. There's a
Mhm.
lot of other things I could be doing with my time, but I really enjoy working with the students and I like working on real things and I like watching them kind of light up and learn as things go through the process throughout the semester. And it can get a little heartfelt too. We've done a lot of different projects in a lot of different places. Many of them have won APA awards, which is fantastic. But some of the more recent ones that we've done have been particularly touching.
Mm.
We did one at City of Rockport shortly after Hurricane Harvey, and where they were trying to start over
Yeah.
essentially from what had happened with the hurricane, and we being able to help them was was really nice. And
Yeah.
it was good for the students. It was great for the community. I think we put a stellar plan together for them to rebuild and really help them. And that's kind of what
Yeah.
it's all about for me at the end of the day. And did win an APA award too, which was
Yeah.
really nice too at the end of the day. But it was more about being able to help them out.
Yeah. It's amazing. And similarly, being a part of Texas Target Communities, what brought me to it, what keeps me in it is the mission of helping bring capacity to places that want to build from within, but just don't have all the capacity they need yet. Literally do not have the time or the tools. So being able to be that partner, that bridge for change, and also like actually empowering a community to make change in their communities. It's definitely really rewarding, and your students often produce, like, very exemplary work. Very much they make I think they make a good name for themselves as
Mhm.
professionals and also just A&M in our program. So, having as many students as you've had and teaching this class many times, do you have any just common advice for professors wanting to do community engaged learning and students who may be thinking about taking a class like this? What advice comes to mind?
Yeah, great question. It probably gives me a chance to summarize a couple of the main things that I've
Mhm.
that I've said, and that is for the students, it's a great place to fail. It's a
Mhm.
great place to try out your chops,
Mm.
and it's okay to fail, right? You can learn some things in a safe environment because honestly, in 6 to 12 months, you're probably going to be doing this for pay. And if you're at a private company, you're going to have a board of directors and a
Mhm.
profit margin and everybody else that needs to satisfy. So this is a great place to learn some of those skills. And on the professor side, I go back again, I think to keeping it very practical, making sure you're coming back to the why of why this particular lecture, why this particular guest lecturer is coming. How does this tie back to what we're doing with the particular project, and helping them kind of see where things are going. And it's mostly much of it is all in an effort, again, to make sure that we're getting the right stakeholders involved and providing that plan that can be helpful for the community.
It's amazing. Thanks, Bill. So thinking about the future, thinking about innovation, is there anything in the future you think this community engaged learning will innovate and grow to?
Great question. Yeah, it's something that I think about a lot. I don't think planning itself fundamentally is going to change much. What we need to do, getting everybody's voice
Yeah.
engaged, and so on and so forth. But what will change is perhaps how do we do that? Like we alluded to earlier, sometimes, making sure we're not missing voices, and how are we going to communicate to everyone in the future? And I'm not real hip with the computers, but I know there's a whole lot of ways that we can do a lot more engagement online. So I certainly see that continuing, but also providing solutions. And what does that look like? Is it digital twins where we're
Yeah.
building environments that people can drive through, fly through, get a feel for, and better understand different scenarios and what things might look like, and how that resonates with their lived experiences and captures what they are trying to communicate in the plan. I think that's where we might be able to do even more in the future.
I agree. Well, Mr. Bill, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. You are the gold standard of managing a community engaged learning classes. So it was a pleasure to get to talk to you, learn from you about it.
Well, I have lots of help, and I appreciate everything that y'all do to make it successful. So
Thanks.
Trying to do my part. Thanks very much. Appreciate the time.
Awesome. If you'd like to learn more about our program, check out our Instagram at TAMUTXTC, or head on over to our website at tx.ag/TXTC.